She gave everybody else their food. You can have mine.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you, sweetie.
She's sick. She told you she's sick. And you still walked right past her.
Little black girl saves the day when the racist flight attendant refused to give a black cancer patient first-class meal. She was 9 years old. She had pigtails, a unicorn backpack, and a foil-wrapped meal sitting on her tray table. She was an unaccompanied minor on a transatlantic flight, and by every rule of childhood logic, she had absolutely no reason to get involved in what was happening 2 rows behind her. But Tiffany Raymond was not the kind of 9-year-old who looked away. You gave everybody else their food. Why didn't you give her hers? The flight attendant stopped. She turned slowly. She looked down at this little girl standing in the aisle of the first-class cabin, 4 feet tall, pigtails, unicorn backpack, and her expression did something that every adult in that cabin noticed and not one of them said a word about. Sit down, little girl. This doesn't concern you. She's sick. She told you she's sick. And you still walked right past her. I said sit down. I'm not sitting down until she gets her food. And then a silence fell over that first-class cabin the way silence only falls when something undeniable has just happened. Passengers turned. A man lowered his newspaper. A woman froze with her glass halfway to her lips. And in seat 4A, a bald woman in a headscarf sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, eyes glistening, not from weakness, not from embarrassment, but from the particular and devastating shock of being defended by someone who had no obligation whatsoever to defend her. The flight attendant leaned down to Tiffany's eye level. Her voice dropped. It became the kind of quiet that is somehow louder than shouting. If you do not return to your seat right now, I will have you removed from this aircraft. Tiffany Raymond looked at her. She did not blink. She did not step back. She reached into the pocket of her seat, picked up her own foil-wrapped meal, turned around, walked 2 rows back, and placed it gently on the tray table of the woman in 4A. You can have mine. Here is what you need to understand about what you just witnessed. That was not a child being disruptive. That was not a little girl throwing a tantrum at 38,000 feet. What you just heard was a 9-year-old doing something that not one adult in that cabin had the courage to do. She saw something wrong, she identified it clearly, she gave everything she had, which was a foil-wrapped airline meal and an unshakable sense of justice, and she acted. But here is the part the flight attendant didn't know. Here is the detail that changes everything. Tucked inside that unicorn backpack, between a chapter book and a bag of pretzels, was her mother's old Samsung phone. And Tiffany Raymond had been pressing record since the moment something first felt wrong. My name is not important. What is important is this story. And today we are going to tell you all of it. The woman in seat 4A is Diana Osei. She is 47 years old. She is a high school music teacher from Atlanta, Georgia. She has spent 19 years in the same classroom, learning the names of every student who walked through her door, attending every recital, staying late, driving students home when their parents didn't show up, caring for other people's children with the kind of dedication that most people reserve for their own. For 19 years, Diana Osei showed up. Every single day. She showed up. And then 18 months before this flight, Diana was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Let that land for a moment. Stage 3. That is not a diagnosis that arrives gently. That is a diagnosis that sits down across from you in a doctor's office and changes the entire geometry of your life. Suddenly the future is not a given. Suddenly every plan you made, every someday you promised yourself, every beautiful ordinary Tuesday you took for granted, all of it looks different. All of it becomes something you cannot assume. Diana started chemotherapy 4 months after her diagnosis. She lost her hair in week 6. She missed 11 weeks of school, the longest she had been away from her classroom in nearly 2 decades. Her students sent cards. They taped them together into one card so large it had to be rolled up and carried to her house in sections. She survived her first round of treatment. And in the private, quiet, exhausted space that only belongs to people who have genuinely stared down the possibility of their own death and kept going, Diana made herself a promise. If she got through it, really got through it, she was going to do the one thing she had always called someday. She was going to fly to London. She was going to see the West End, the jazz clubs, the city she had spent 19 years teaching music history about. She was going to sit in the middle of it and breathe it in and let herself feel, even for just a few days, like someone who had survived enough to deserve something beautiful. She started saving 14 months before the departure date. She made 9 separate deposits into a savings account she had opened when she was 26 years old. She chose first class specifically, not for luxury, but because this airline's website advertised medically accommodated meal services for passengers with documented dietary requirements. Diana's oncologist, Dr. Priya Nair, had written a formal letter on clinic letterhead detailing Diana's low-sodium, high-protein dietary requirements and the medical necessity behind them. 6 weeks before the flight, Diana submitted her meal pre-order through the airline's online portal. She received a confirmation email. She printed it. She put it in her carry-on alongside the medical letter, her booking confirmation, and a small notebook in which she had written her London itinerary in her careful, beautiful teacher's handwriting. The week before the flight, her fatigue was bad. She almost didn't go. Her daughter Kezia sat beside her on the couch and said, "Mama, you are going. I will drive you to the airport myself." Kezia drove her to Hartsfield Jackson at 5 in the morning. They stood at the departure's entrance and held each other for a long time. Now let's talk about the little girl in seat 3A. Tiffany Raymond is 9 years old. She has made this transatlantic flight twice before, which means she walks through the cabin like someone who knows what she is doing. She is registered with the airline's unaccompanied minor program. She has a lanyard around her neck with her name, her father's number, and her emergency contact information. Her father, Marcus Raymond, works in finance in Canary Wharf in London and is expecting her at arrivals. Her mother, Claudette Raymond, packed her bag, walked her to the gate, knelt down to her eye level in the departures hall, and gave her 3 things: a bag of pretzels, her old Samsung phone loaded with downloaded shows and games, and one instruction. "Baby, if anything ever feels wrong, and you will know when something feels wrong, you press record." Tiffany and Diana found each other before the plane even left the gate. Diana smiled at the little girl sitting alone in 3. Tiffany, with the directness that only children possess, asked if Diana was cold because of her headscarf. Diana explained, quietly and gently, that she was going through something called treatment, and that her headscarf kept her warm and made her feel like herself. Tiffany nodded the way children nod when something makes complete and immediate sense to them. She offered Diana one of her pretzels. Diana accepted. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, Tiffany Raymond had decided that the elegant woman in 4A was her person for this flight. Flight 447. Atlanta to London Heathrow. A Tuesday afternoon. The sky above the clouds is the blue that only exists at altitude, that specific, impossible blue that makes you feel briefly suspended above every difficulty on the ground. Diana settled into seat 4A. Her first time in first class in her life. She straightened the tray table. She arranged her small pillow. She looked out at the blue through the oval window. And she exhaled. A long, slow, complete exhale. For a moment, she was not a cancer patient. She was not a woman who had spent last Thursday in an infusion chair. She was not someone who had spent the better part of 18 months in hospital corridors. She was just Diana. In a good seat. Going somewhere beautiful. Finally. Tiffany peeked through the gap in the seats and offered another pretzel. Diana smiled and took it. The cabin was warm. The engine hum was steady. Everything was exactly as it should have been. And then flight attendant Jennifer Cole pushed her meal cart toward row 4. Before we go any further, if you are watching this story and you feel something right now, if something in you already knows this is wrong, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next in this cabin needs to be seen. And this channel makes sure stories like Diana's are never ignored. Subscribe right now. We are just getting started. Before we go further, when Tiffany stood up in that aisle, what do you think was going through the minds of every adult passenger who stayed silent? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Jennifer Cole had been a flight attendant for 15 years. 15 years is enough time to build a rhythm, a routine, a way of reading a cabin the moment you step onto a plane. It is enough time to know every procedure, every escalation protocol, every line in the manual. It is also, apparently, Enough time to build assumptions so deeply embedded that they no longer feel like assumptions. They just feel like instinct. Jennifer moved through the first-class cabin the way she always did. Efficient. Polished. The smile reaching her eyes for seat 1A. A silver-haired businessman who had already asked for 2 glasses of wine before they reached altitude. Warm for seat 2A. A man named Richard who had nodded off with his reading glasses still on his face. Bright for seat 1B. A woman who had covered her lap with a cashmere travel blanket and was watching something on her tablet. And for seat 3A. A slightly tighter smile for the little girl with the unicorn backpack. A quick placement of the meal tray. A move-along energy that suggested Tiffany was not her primary concern. Jennifer reached row 4. She looked at Diana Osei. She took in the headscarf. The dark skin. The quiet, composed presence. The hands folded in the lap. And something shifted. You would not have been able to name it if you were sitting nearby. It was not dramatic. It was not a sneer or a raised eyebrow or an obvious sign. It was subtler than that. It was the kind of thing that black people in this world have been reading in white faces for their entire lives. A micro-expression, a recalibration, a split-second decision made before a single word passed between them. Jennifer set down a meal on Diana's tray. It was the standard economy meal. Diana looked at it. She looked up at Jennifer. And with the quiet, unhurried courtesy that was simply who she was, she said that she believed there had been a mistake. She had pre-ordered a medical meal 6 weeks ago and had a confirmation email if Jennifer needed to see it. Jennifer's expression did not change. She said there was no record of a special meal request on her side. Diana, still calm, reached into her carry-on and produced the printed confirmation email. She placed it on the tray beside the wrong meal. Jennifer glanced at it. A glance. Not a read. A glance. And then she said that the kitchen could not accommodate changes at this stage of the flight. Diana, still without any change in her tone, clarified that this was not a change. It was a pre-order made 43 days ago, confirmed in writing by the airline. What Jennifer said next was the moment. It was the sentence that, in any honest accounting of what happened on Flight 447, must be understood as the turning point. Because Jennifer Cole looked at Diana Osei, a woman who had not raised her voice, had not made a scene, had not been anything other than courteous and measured, and said, loudly enough for the surrounding rows to hear, "I'm going to need you to lower your voice." Diana had not raised her voice once. In seat 3, Tiffany Raymond went very still. She had been listening through the gap in the seats. She had heard the exchange. She had heard the confirmation email being produced. She had heard the quiet voice Diana had used, and she had heard the accusation Jennifer had just made. Something in her small chest tightened. Her mother's voice came to her clearly. If anything feels wrong, you press record. Tiffany reached into her unicorn backpack. She found the Samsung phone. She pressed record. The battery was at 34%. Jennifer moved on. She did not resolve the issue. She did not bring the correct meal. She simply moved away from row 4, leaving Diana sitting in front of a meal she medically could not eat, with a printed confirmation of the meal she had ordered sitting on her tray like evidence at a scene. A few minutes passed. Then Jennifer returned, and she had brought someone with her. His name was Marcus. He was another member of the first-class cabin crew. He was a tall man with a careful expression and the particular body language of someone who has been briefed rather than asked. He did not greet Diana. He did not introduce himself. He simply stood beside Jennifer, arms loosely folded, and waited. Jennifer repeated her position. There was no record of a special meal request. The economy meal was what was available. Diana did not escalate. She took a breath. She reached back into her carry-on and produced the second document, the formal letter from Dr. Priya Nair, printed on clinic letterhead, outlining her dietary requirements, the medical necessity behind them, and a note that failure to accommodate them during the flight could cause significant physical distress to the patient. She held it out to Jennifer. Jennifer took it. She read approximately 3 lines. She handed it back. "That's not official airline documentation." Diana asked, with genuine and patient bewilderment, what official documentation would satisfy her. Jennifer did not answer. She exchanged a look with Marcus. Marcus said nothing. Diana Osei was a woman who had sat in a chemotherapy chair and not flinched. She was a woman who had lost her hair and gone back to school and stood in front of 30 teenagers every day and not let them see her break. She was not going to break now. But she also understood, with a clarity that only comes from lived experience, exactly what was happening. This was not a clerical error. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a woman who had looked at her, looked at the headscarf, looked at the dark skin, looked at the first-class seat, and decided that something here was wrong. And then Jennifer Cole did something that took the situation into a different register entirely. She asked to see Diana's boarding pass. She said, in a tone carefully calibrated to sound procedural, that she needed to verify the seat assignment because first-class upgrades were sometimes processed with errors in the system. Diana handed over her boarding pass. She did not argue. She did not point out that she had been sitting in this seat for 3 hours without incident. She handed it over and waited. Jennifer walked away with it, down the aisle, out of sight, toward the galley. And Diana sat in seat 4A, bald head covered, body tired from months of treatment, without her own boarding pass, on a plane at 38,000 feet, and waited. In seat 3A, Tiffany kept the phone steady against the gap in the seats. Battery at 22%. Jennifer returned with someone new. This was Purser Helen Marsh. Senior to Jennifer in the cabin hierarchy. The person you call when something needs to be officially addressed. Helen looked tired. That was the first thing anyone would have noticed about her in this moment. Not cruel. Not unkind. Just tired. The kind of tired that makes people defer to whoever seems most certain, because certainty is easier than investigation. What Jennifer said to Helen, in front of the passengers in rows 1, 2, and 3, who could hear every word, was this: she believed there had been a ticketing irregularity with seat 4A. She also wanted Helen to know that the passenger in 4A had been confrontational. Diana said quietly and clearly, "I have not raised my voice once." Richard in seat 2A, who had woken up from his nap at some point during all of this, shifted in his seat. He adjusted his seatbelt. He looked at the headrest in front of him. He did not speak. The woman in 1B turned her face toward her window. Not one person in that cabin said a single word. Helen Marsh looked at Diana. She looked at Jennifer. She made the choice of someone who is tired and uncertain and deferring to the more confident person in the room. She said she was going to have to escalate this to the senior cabin officer. Diana Osei straightened her back. She placed her documents, boarding pass confirmation, booking confirmation, medical letter, meal pre-order, in a neat stack on her tray table. She folded her hands on top of them. She had sat in hospital waiting rooms and been patient. She had sat in insurance offices and been patient. She had spent 18 months being patient with a disease that had no interest in her patients. She could wait a little longer. And in seat 3, Tiffany Raymond watched the whole thing through the gap in the seats, phone in hand, recording everything. The battery hit 14%. She did not stop recording. Then Tiffany Raymond did the thing that nobody in that cabin expected. The thing that an adult would have second-guessed, rationalized, talked themselves out of. She stood up. She stepped into the aisle. She walked to Jennifer Cole. And she said, in a voice that did not shake even though she was 9 years old and Jennifer Cole was a fully grown adult in a position of authority on a plane at 38,000 feet. "You gave everybody else their food. Why didn't you give her hers?" Jennifer told her to sit down. Tiffany didn't. Jennifer threatened to have her removed from the aircraft. Tiffany said she's sick, she told you she's sick, and you still walked right past her. And when Jennifer leaned down and made that threat at close range, Tiffany Raymond reached into the seat pocket, picked up her own meal, walked 2 rows back, and put it on Diana's tray. "You can have mine." The cabin was absolutely silent. Diana looked at this little girl. This 9-year-old who had chosen her, in the way that children sometimes choose people, completely, instinctively, without reservation. And Diana, who had held herself together through every single thing that had happened in that cabin, felt the back of her throat tighten. Not because she had been saved, but because she had been seen. If this story is hitting you, if you are feeling something right now watching a 9-year-old do what a cabin full of adults refuse to do, please subscribe to this channel. Ring the notification bell. Share this video. Because stories like Diana's matter, and the only way they get heard is if people like you make sure they are. Subscribe now. We are not done yet. At this point in the story, we have a full cabin of adults who watched everything and said nothing, except one 9-year-old girl. What do you think stopped the adults from speaking up? Let us know in the comments. Senior Cabin Officer James Okafor had been with this airline for 20 years. He was Nigerian-British. He had grown up between Lagos and London and had been moving between those two worlds, and every world in between, his entire life. He had worked first class on long-haul routes for 14 of his 20 years. He had seen virtually everything that could happen at altitude between human beings. And in all of that time, across all of those flights, he had developed one unshakable professional principle. You do not assume. You verify. He arrived at row 4 with the unhurried authority of someone who has no interest in drama and every interest in accuracy. He asked Jennifer to give him her account first. Jennifer spoke. She described the situation as a ticketing concern, a passenger who had become difficult about a meal discrepancy, and the possibility of an upgrade processing error. She described Diana as having been uncooperative. James listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he turned to Diana. And here is the thing about Diana Osei that needed to be understood in that moment. She was not angry. She had every right to be angry. She had spent, at this point, the better part of 2 hours being challenged, dismissed, accused of confrontation she had not engaged in, and made to justify her presence in a seat she had legally purchased and saved 14 months to occupy. She had produced documentation that had been dismissed without being properly read. She had had her boarding pass taken from her and her character publicly questioned. By any reasonable measure, Diana Osei was owed a great deal of anger. But she was not going to give Jennifer Cole her anger. Because Diana understood something that took most people decades to learn. Your dignity is the one thing that cannot be taken from you unless you hand it over. And she was not handing it over. She spoke to James Okafor the way she spoke to everything in her life, directly, clearly, and without performance. She explained what had happened from the beginning. The pre-ordered meal. The confirmation email, which she had printed. The medical letter from Dr. Nair, which she had brought. The boarding pass, which had been taken from her. The accusation of confrontation, which had been made without basis. She laid it all out. And then she placed each document on the tray table, one by one, in the order they were relevant, and she waited. James looked at the documents. He said nothing for a moment. Then he asked Jennifer one question. Did you check the system before you changed her meal? Jennifer said she had. James nodded. He picked up the cabin tablet from the galley trolley. He opened the passenger manifest. He navigated to the meal pre-orders. He scrolled. He read in silence. And the silence stretched. Because the truth is that the moments just before justice are often the longest. They are the moments where everything is still unresolved, where one face is still confident and the other is exhausted, where the outcome could theoretically still go either way, even when, in reality, it has already been determined. Jennifer Cole still looked certain. She had the particular posture of someone who has made a wrong call and is fully committed to it. Diana sat with her hands folded, her documents neat, her expression still. James turned the tablet screen so Jennifer could see it. Then he read it aloud. Passenger, Diana Osei. Seat, 4A. Meal selection, medical dietary meal, low sodium, high protein. Pre-order date, 43 days prior to flight. Status, confirmed and paid. He set the tablet down. And then from seat 3A, a small voice rose into the silence of that first-class cabin. Excuse me. I also have a video. Tiffany Raymond held her mother's Samsung phone through the gap between the seats. The battery was at 9%. She had been recording for the better part of an hour. She had footage of the first exchange. She had footage of Marcus standing silently beside Jennifer. She had footage of the medical letter being handed back after a 3-line glance. She had footage of Jennifer saying that Diana had been confrontational. She had footage of all of it. James Okafor took the phone. He and Helen Marsh watched the video on the tablet together. The cabin was so quiet you could have heard the altitude. Jennifer Cole's face, during those minutes of review, went through a series of expressions that no amount of 15 years of professional composure could fully contain. The certainty drained first. Then something that looked like the physical experience of understanding what has just happened. Then something smaller and harder that was not quite shame but was at least its first cousin. James handed the phone back to Tiffany. He looked at Tiffany for a moment with an expression that, if you were watching carefully, you would describe as something close to gratitude. Then he asked Jennifer to come with him to the rear galley. The passengers in rows 1, 2, and 3 heard fragments of what was said back there. Not all of it. Just enough. Just enough to understand that James Okafor was a man who said what needed to be said clearly and without decoration, and that Jennifer Cole was on the receiving end of exactly that. Jennifer emerged from the galley looking like her uniform had become 3 sizes too large for her. Helen Marsh came to row 4. She was carrying Diana's medical meal. The correct meal, the one that had been pre-ordered 43 days ago, the one that should have arrived with the very first service. She placed it on Diana's tray with both hands, the way you place something when you are trying to communicate with your body that you understand the weight of what you are doing. She said she was deeply sorry. She said it again. Diana thanked her, quietly. James Okafor came to row 4 next. He sat down in the empty seat across the aisle for a moment. He said, "This should not have happened on my aircraft. I am sorry that it did. And I want you to know that it will be formally documented and fully addressed." Diana nodded. She said thank you. Jennifer Cole was removed from first-class duties for the remainder of the flight. She did not return to the forward cabin. Diana Osei opened her medical meal. The correct one. The one her oncologist had prescribed and she had ordered and confirmed and printed and carried and protected through everything that had just happened. She ate it slowly. At 38,000 feet. Over the Atlantic. On her way to London. Tiffany Raymond turned around in her seat, grinning with the complete, uncomplicated joy that only belongs to someone who has done the right thing and knows it. Diana reached forward through the seat gap and held Tiffany's small hand for a moment. Outside the window, the Atlantic stretched in every direction, vast and quiet and indifferent to everything that had just happened inside that cabin. The sky above it was still that same blue. Still the blue that exists only at altitude. Still the blue Diana had exhaled into a few hours ago when she sat down in seat 4A and felt, for one perfect moment, like someone who had survived enough to deserve something beautiful. She looked at it. And then she cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just the tears that come when you have been holding something so tightly for so long that the moment it is finally over your body simply lets it go. Tears that were not about the meal and not even entirely about Jennifer Cole. Tears for the months in the infusion chair. Tears for the 11 weeks of school she missed. Tears for the morning her daughter drove her to the airport before dawn and held her at the departure's entrance because neither of them was sure what the year ahead would bring. Tears for every moment she had spent being strong when the world had given her no other viable option. Tiffany, who did not fully understand all of it but understood enough, leaned through the seat gap and whispered, "You okay?" Diana wiped her face. She smiled. "I am now. If this story is moving you, if James Okafor doing the right thing, and Tiffany's courage, and Diana's dignity through all of it is making you feel something, please subscribe to this channel right now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And keep watching. Because what happens when Tiffany's mother posts that video will change everything. When James read that tablet confirmation aloud, that Diana's meal had been pre-ordered 43 days ago, what do you think Jennifer Cole was feeling in that moment? Tell us in the comments. The plane landed at London Heathrow on a Tuesday evening. Diana cleared passport control slowly, because her body was still carrying the weight of everything. The treatment, the flight, the 2 hours of being made to justify her presence in a seat she had every legal and moral right to occupy. She collected her luggage. She stepped out into arrivals. She found her hotel transfer and got in. She texted Kezia from the car. Her daughter had been awake, waiting. The text Diana sent was 4 words, "I made it, baby." She did not tell Kezia what had happened on the plane. Not yet. She wanted to sit with London for a moment first. She wanted the city to be the first thing she felt, not the shadow of what Jennifer Cole had done. Meanwhile, at London Heathrow arrivals, a man named Marcus Raymond was waiting with a handwritten sign and a 9-year-old girl running full speed across the terminal toward him. Tiffany Raymond threw herself at her father and he caught her, lifted her off the ground, and held her while she talked at approximately 400 words per minute about the flight, about Diana, about the meal, about standing up in the aisle, about James reading the tablet. Marcus called Claudette from the car. He put the phone on speaker so Tiffany could tell her mother everything herself. Claudette listened to every word. When Tiffany was done, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm proud of you, baby. You did exactly right." Then Claudette Raymond asked Tiffany to send her the video. That night, Claudette watched the footage. All of it. The first exchange. The medical letter being handed back. Jennifer saying that Diana had been confrontational. Tiffany standing in the aisle. The foil-wrapped meal being placed on Diana's tray. And Claudette Raymond, sitting in her apartment in Atlanta, felt something move through her that she would describe later, in the one interview she agreed to, months after everything happened, as a combination of fury and pride so overwhelming that she had to sit with it for a full hour before she decided what to do. What she decided to do was post the video. No production. No editing. No voiceover. No hashtags. Just the raw cabin footage from her daughter's phone, shaky and imperfect and absolutely undeniable. The caption was 9 words. 9 words that may be the most economical caption in the history of viral content. My daughter was on this flight. She recorded this. That was it. Nothing else. Posted at 11:47 at night, Atlanta time. By the time Claudette woke up the next morning, the post had 300,000 views. By noon, it had passed 1 million. By the following evening, it had reached 2 million views. Then 3. The comments were not what you would call measured. They were not a balanced discourse. They were the particular kind of collective online response that happens when a video is not merely provocative but genuinely, visually, auditorily undeniable. You could see Jennifer Cole's face. You could hear the exchanges word for word. You could see Diana's quiet dignity. You could see the moment Tiffany stood up. There was no ambiguity. There was no, well, we don't know the full story. There was a full story, and it was all on camera, and it lasted 43 minutes. Jennifer Cole was identified within 18 hours. Someone recognized the uniform tag. Someone else found her LinkedIn profile. A third person cross-referenced and found her Facebook. Screenshots spread. Her employer was tagged in posts numbering in the tens of thousands within the first day. The airline's social media team was overwhelmed. Their customer service line crashed twice. The airline released a formal statement 36 hours after the video went live. The statement said, in language that had clearly passed through several lawyers and one communications director, that the airline did not tolerate discrimination of any kind, that the incident depicted in the video was inconsistent with their values and training standards, that the employee in question had been suspended pending a full internal investigation, and that the airline was committed to reaching out directly to the affected passenger. Jennifer Cole did not return to work after the suspension. She was, in the language of a subsequent statement released 3 weeks later, no longer with the company. BBC News ran the story. CNN picked it up. The Root covered it. Several British newspapers ran it on their front pages, because Flight 447 had been a London-bound flight and the story landed on British soil with particular weight given ongoing national conversations about race and service and who gets to occupy which spaces. The phrase, "the little girl in 3," entered the cultural conversation within 48 hours. Tiffany's name was not published anywhere. Claudette had made that decision clearly and immediately. Tiffany was 9 years old and her identity was going to be protected, full stop. Every journalist who contacted Claudette was told the same thing. Every media request was declined. Tiffany Raymond spent her school holidays in London with her father. She went to the Natural History Museum. She rode on a double-decker bus. She had fish and chips. She was, as far as anyone around her was concerned, a 9-year-old on holiday. The fact that she had become, in the eyes of several million people, a symbol of moral clarity and unexpected courage, she was largely unaware of this, and her parents intended to keep it that way. Diana Osei was in London when the video exploded. She woke up to missed calls from Kezia, who had seen it. She woke up to a message from one of her colleagues at school who had seen it. She woke up to the particular disorientation of finding out that something you lived through quietly has been witnessed by millions of people while you were sleeping. A reporter found her outside her hotel on the second day. They asked for a comment. Diana looked at the camera for a moment. Then she said the truest, most complete, most perfectly precise thing that could have been said about everything that had happened. I just wanted my meal. 6 words. And somehow those 6 words said everything. They said, I was not looking for a fight. I was not looking for a symbol. I was not looking for a viral moment or a cause or a news cycle. I was a woman on a plane who had a first-class ticket and a medical requirement and a confirmed pre-order, and I wanted the meal I had paid for and documented and carried the paperwork for. That's it. That is the entirety of what I asked for. And look what it took to get it. The internet heard those 6 words and felt them. But here is the thing about viral justice that is almost always overlooked in the rush of the response. The shares, the outrage, the company statements, the terminations. The validation is real. The accountability, when it comes, is meaningful. But the story underneath the story, the reason it resonated with millions of people in the first place, is not really about Jennifer Cole at all. Black passengers in premium cabins are questioned. This is documented. This has been documented for years. Black doctors on planes who step forward to help in a medical emergency are asked to prove their credentials before they are allowed to assist. Black travelers are followed through airport terminals. Black people in nice cars are pulled over at higher rates. Black people in upscale stores are followed by security. The through line of all of it, the single assumption connecting every single one of those incidents, is the same: you don't belong here. You didn't earn this. Something about this picture is wrong. Diana Osei was not questioned because of her behavior. Her behavior was impeccable from beginning to end, and it was documented on video for all to see. She was questioned because of the distance between a dark-skinned woman in a headscarf and a first-class seat, and one person's inability to accept that the distance was not a discrepancy. That the first-class seat was exactly where Diana belonged, because Diana had bought it, paid for it, saved for it across 9 deposits over 14 months, and had every piece of documentation in the known universe to prove it. Jennifer Cole did not look at Diana and see a 19-year veteran teacher. She did not see a woman who had survived stage 3 breast cancer. She did not see someone who had made a promise to herself during the hardest year of her life and kept it. She saw a demographic and a seat class, and she put them together and reached a conclusion that the passenger manifest, the booking system, the confirmation email, the medical letter, and 43 days of pre-order history all contradicted. But she had reached the conclusion before any of those things had been presented. She had reached it the moment she looked at row 4. That is the story underneath the story. And 2 million views, 3 million for million, none of that changes it. It just makes it visible. If you understand why this story matters beyond the video, beyond the termination, beyond the viral moment, subscribe to this channel right now. We cover these stories not for the outrage but for the truth underneath them. Ring that notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because we still have more to tell you, and the ending of Diana's story is not what you might expect. Claudette's caption was just 9 words. My daughter was on this flight. She recorded this. Do you think the simplicity of that caption is part of why it went so viral? Or was it purely the footage itself? Comment below. 3 weeks after the video crossed 4 million views, a new Instagram account appeared. The profile picture was a deliberately neutral image, not a face, just a soft focus background. The bio said nothing except a single line about personal growth. And the account's first and only post was a 289-word public apology from Jennifer Cole. It was carefully constructed. You could feel the construction in it the way you can feel scaffolding through plaster. Phrases like unconscious bias and a personal growth journey, and this has been a profound period of reflection, and never my intention to cause harm, appeared with the regularity of a checklist. The apology acknowledged, in language that never quite became specific, that Jennifer's actions had been wrong. It spoke about commitment to learning. It mentioned therapy. It used the word journey twice and the phrase do better once. It was the apology of someone whose primary concern was rehabilitation of reputation. It was written, and you could feel this too, with at least one lawyer's fingerprints on the language. It was the apology you write when you need to be seen to apologize, not the apology you write when you actually understand what you did. Diana Osei did not respond. She was, at the time the apology was posted, sitting in an infusion chair at her oncology clinic in Atlanta. Kezia was in the chair beside her, as she had been for many of these sessions. Kezia had seen the apology on her phone and read it aloud to her mother in the clinic. Diana listened to every word with her eyes closed. When Kezia finished reading, Diana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Close it." And that was the entirety of Diana Osei's response to Jennifer Cole's public apology. Some of Diana's students printed it out. They left the printout on her desk when she came back to school after treatment. They had highlighted, in yellow, every phrase that sounded like it was written by a PR team rather than a human being. In the margin next to unconscious bias, one of her students had written, in neat handwriting, "This is what accountability is not." Diana looked at it for a long moment when she arrived in her classroom. She picked it up. She put it in her desk drawer. The following week, she used it as a teaching resource in her critical thinking unit. Because Diana Osei was, before she was a cancer patient and before she was a viral story and before she was the woman in for it, a teacher. And teachers find the lesson in everything. 6 months after Flight 447, Diana is still in Atlanta. She is still teaching. She has just begun her second round of treatment, which her oncologist says is going better than the first. Her students still make her cards. She still knows every one of their names. And she still flies. That is important to say clearly. Jennifer Cole did not take that from her. The incident on Flight 447 did not make Diana Osei afraid to board a plane. She went to London. She saw the Thames at night, reflecting the city lights in long gold ribbons across the water. She sat in a basement jazz club in Soho and listened to a saxophonist play something so beautiful she forgot, for an hour, that her body was at war with itself. She walked through the National Portrait Gallery and stood in front of a painting she had shown her students on a screen for 15 years and finally saw it in person, the actual paint, the actual canvas, the actual light. She ticked every item off the list in her careful handwriting. She came home. But she boards differently now. She arrives earlier than she needs to. She prints every confirmation twice, one copy in her carry-on, one copy in her checked bag. Keeps her medical letter on top of the pile, first thing that can be accessed, not tucked away as an afterthought. She does not tuck things away anymore. She keeps her documents visible. She keeps them ready. Because the world, this specific, particular world, has made it clear to her that visibility and readiness are not optional. There is a word for what Diana Osei carries now that she did not carry before Flight 447. It is not trauma, exactly, though the incident was traumatic. It is not fear, exactly, though certain moments in certain spaces now trigger a watchfulness that was not there before. The word is hypervigilance. It is the word psychologists use to describe the state of sustained alertness that develops in people who have been made to understand that their safety, their dignity, their right to exist peacefully in a given space, is not guaranteed. It is the cost of having been shown, clearly and undeniably, that your belonging is conditional. That is what Jennifer Cole gave Diana Osei. That is the real consequence of what happened on Flight 447, beyond the termination, beyond the viral video, beyond the airline statement and the hollow apology. She gave Diana the knowledge, visceral, embodied, not theoretical, that the seat she saves for, the space she earns, the room she deserves can be challenged at any moment by any person who looks at her and decides, before she has spoken a word, that something is wrong with the picture. And Tiffany Raymond flew home to Atlanta 2 weeks after the video went viral. Her father put her on the plane at Heathrow with her lanyard and her unicorn backpack and her chapter book and the Samsung phone, now famous, though she didn't fully understand that part, and she flew back to her mother. Claudette was waiting at arrivals. They drove home. Tiffany had fish and chips and double-decker buses and the Natural History Museum to talk about for weeks. She did not think of herself as a hero. She was genuinely, completely, authentically unbothered by the idea that millions of people had watched her stand up in a first-class aisle. When her mother, carefully and gently, explained that a lot of people had seen the video and that some people were calling Tiffany very brave, Tiffany looked at her mother and said, "But I just gave her my food. You're not supposed to let people go hungry." Yes, baby. You are not supposed to let people go hungry. Here is what Tiffany Raymond understood at 9 years old that every adult in that cabin failed to apply. Justice is not complicated. It is only made complicated by the systems and social calculations and risk assessments that adults accumulate over the course of a lifetime, the weighing of what might happen if you say something against what is happening right in front of you if you don't. Tiffany had not yet fully built those calculations. She saw a sick woman who had not been given her food. She saw that it was wrong. She stood up. The adults in that cabin had those calculations fully constructed. Richard in 2A had them. The woman in 1B had them. Marcus the flight attendant had them. Even Helen Marsh, who should have known better and had the authority to act sooner, had them. Every person in that cabin performed the same unconscious calculation, the cost of intervention versus the cost of silence, and concluded that silence was safer. Only Tiffany hadn't learned that math yet. There is a reason this story went to 4 million views in 48 hours, and it is not complicated either. It is because people recognize something in it. Not just the discrimination, though that was real and documented and clear, but the particular combination of Diana's dignity and Tiffany's courage. The image of a 9-year-old girl with a unicorn backpack standing in a first-class aisle and refusing to sit down while a cabin full of adults looked the other way. That image struck something that goes deeper than any individual incident. It struck the question that we are always, in every generation, working through: what does it actually take to act? Jennifer Cole looked at a bald black woman in a headscarf in a first-class seat and made a decision about her before a single word passed between them. She decided that the seat was wrong. She decided that the image needed correcting. She was wrong, provably, documentably, tablet and 43 days of pre-order history wrong. But she was wrong in a way that felt, to her, like being right. And that is the most dangerous kind of wrong there is. Because it requires no malice. It requires only an assumption so deeply held that it no longer feels like an assumption. It just feels like seeing clearly. Diana Osei saved for 14 months. She documented everything. She carried every piece of paper. She remained composed through every escalation. She did absolutely everything right. And she was still made, by one woman's unchallenged assumption and one cabin full of people who chose not to interrupt it, to prove that she belonged. The tablet proved Jennifer wrong. The video proved Jennifer wrong. 43 days of booking history proved Jennifer wrong. But proving someone wrong does not undo what was done. It does not give back the 2 hours. It does not give back the ease. It does not give back the exhale that Diana released when she first sat down in seat 4A and felt, for one perfect, uncomplicated moment, like someone who had earned something beautiful. That exhale. That specific, particular exhale of a woman who had survived a year of treatment and saved 14 months and gotten on the plane and found her seat and looked out the window at 38,000 feet and felt, maybe for the first time in a very long time, that the world was giving her something back. That is what was taken. Not the meal. The meal was returned. Not the seat. The seat was always hers. Not even the dignity. Diana Osei's dignity was never Jennifer Cole's to take. What was taken was the peace. The uncomplicated, unguarded, undefended peace of a woman who just wanted to sit in a good seat and eat her meal and watch the Atlantic pass beneath her and feel, for a few hours, like none of the rest of it, the cancer, the treatment, the hospital corridors, the fear, was the whole of the story. That peace has not fully come back. And no apology, not 289 words, not 2,000, not 2 million, gives it back. Diana Osei is still teaching. She is still going to recitals. She is still staying late. She is still driving students home when their parents don't show up. She is still, in the deepest sense, who she was before any of this happened. But she keeps her documents on top now. She keeps them ready. She boards early. She prints everything twice. Because being black in this world means your belonging is always subject to proof. Your ownership of everything, your seat, your meal, your body, your peace, is always conditional. Always provisional. Always one stranger's unchallenged assumption away from being called into question. The boarding pass confirmed she belonged. The tablet confirmed she had ordered the meal. The video confirmed she had done nothing wrong. And none of it, not one piece of it, should have been necessary. That is the story of Flight 447. That is the story of Diana Osei and Tiffany Raymond and Jennifer Cole and a first-class cabin full of people who made a choice on a Tuesday afternoon at 38,000 feet. Most of them chose to look away. One of them chose to stand up. She was 9 years old. She had pigtails. She had a unicorn backpack. And she had her mother's voice in her head saying, "If anything feels wrong, you press record." She pressed record. And the world saw what happens when one person, one small, unafraid, uncalculating person, refuses to look away. If this story stayed with you, if Diana's dignity, Tiffany's courage, and the truth underneath this whole story means something to you, please subscribe to this channel right now. Share this video. Leave a comment. Tell someone about it. Because the only thing that makes stories like this matter beyond the moment is the people who refuse to let them be forgotten. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. Subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Final question, and we genuinely want to know your thoughts. What do you think is the single most powerful moment in this entire story? Is it Tiffany standing up? Is it James reading the tablet aloud? Is it Diana's 6-word comment to the reporter? Tell us in the comments below. We read every single one.